Have you got them all out there in the wild world out there? Okay, I'm going to resume the meeting. We're going on to item 12, which is the approval of shareholder comments from the CCOs. This has been workshopped. We've managed to get 20 or 30 different points of view across. The AT was the one that was particularly in need of work. Welcome, Alistair.
Good afternoon, Chair. Look, I will take the report as read. As the Mayor says, we've workshopped these draft shareholder comments with you. I'll just remind you, you sent a letter of expectation to the CCOs. The CCOs have sent you their draft statements of intent. These are comments based on how they responded to the letters of expectation, decisions in the LTP, plus feedback from the workshop that we had last week. I'll just say that shareholder feedback is due by the end of the month, which is a couple of days away, so any feedback from the meeting today will incorporate into the draft letters, and we're seeking a delegation to the Mayor to sign those letters out on behalf of Auckland Council. I have the team with me and happy to take any questions.
Councillor Walker.
I haven't got the precise parts in front of me, but I have a concern around the Tautaki proposals, and I'd invite your comment. My understanding is that the SOSA process as it stands may well not run its course. Quite obviously there's been a change in respect of North Harbour Stadium. I've been a member of the working group looking at stadiums, and no doubt there'll be some outcomes out of that. Are we in a position to change that wording? And in addition to that, there's also a quote that references the CCO review that Auckland has too many stadiums. In my view, that CCO review was not informed, and in point of fact, I think it's well established that we actually need more stadiums, not less, not necessarily large stadiums, but boutique stadiums. And that is the current play, particularly because of the success and emergence of new franchises. So I have a real concern that we have this process with a CCO that's frankly based on information that is out of date. So that goes to Tautaki.
Thanks for the question. I'll respond to that. Yeah, I think since Tautaki have responded to the letter of expectation as was drafted, which did, when was that? December, so that did reflect Council's existing position, which is for a single operator. Obviously, that process has been somewhat delayed, particularly given the process that's running around Main Stadium, which you'll be contemplating later today in the confidential section. So I think there's an opportunity that post today's session, I think there's an opportunity for Council to consider whether that still is its position, that it wants to endorse a single operator, and if it's not, whether there's other things we could be asking of Tautaki in that space. So I think Tautaki have responded to the direction as they were given, but there could be an opportunity, certainly in the finalisation of the SOI, to reflect the position, reflect decisions that have come through out of the stadium's working group or otherwise.
The other question I've got is just around access to financials, and that's access to better and more comprehensive financials from all of the council-controlled organisations. Myself and Councillor Williamson share that desire. The Power BI information is woefully inadequate, and against a background where there are any perceived difficulties, the raw data, which is what Councillor Williamson would ask for, would be appropriate. And the reason that I ask for that is, in my opinion, the only adequate way that we as councillors have oversight over the CCOs, and in particular that goes to financial oversight, is to have access to the information. because the information otherwise, and I could go on about the deficiencies, isn't adequate, is not adequate, especially when you want to make changes around particular stadiums or particular aspects of a council-controlled organisation. It could be any of them, and you actually don't know what particular things are costing. That could be road cones, it could be a stadium, it could be, you know, a facility like the Aotea Centre, it could be anything. So is that something that we can incorporate?
Phil and I are looking at each other. I'll start and then he'll tell me where I'm wrong. Look, the quarterly reporting and the financial information in the statements of intent are now sort of broken down to a more granular level at activities. In the case of Tātaki, mostly by facility. So you are getting financial information on expenditure, revenue, attendance at various venues. I think for more granular information, it's probably not appropriate at a statement of intent level, but it might be something that the Revenue and Expenditure Committee might want to pick up with individual CCOs. Phil, have you got anything you'd like to?
The council put in charge of each one can ask those.
No, I've got nothing to add, Alistair, thanks.
It's possible for, if you have particular aspects, we do have a councillor who's associated with each of these ones, and we could ask that particular one. Who's the person for Tātaki? I'm not sure, I've forgotten.
That's Shane Henderson. Oh, sorry, I'm mistaken.
I think that's Councillor Henderson, if I'm correct. And I mean, you could always ask Councillor Henderson to dig out particular aspects if that's what you wished.
I've just bowled in with my peanuts. I'm not sure what's going on, but the Deputy Mayor is the leader of Tātaki.
The late Councillor Henderson.
I have another question that goes to Auckland Transport, and I've noted the reporting and the performance indicators, but what is lacking, and I continue to raise this, is any performance indicator that really goes to overall mobility around the network, especially the roading network, and especially the efficiency of vehicles, cars, across that network. It's not there. The reason that I'm asking for this is when I visit overseas cities and I see the efficiency of vehicle movement across those cities, which especially is driven by the application of smart technology, including cameras that recognise vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists, and so on, and you can move through intersections often at speed, and I could go on. The only way that you actually drive those things often is if you're measuring them. If you're measuring them, you also get a good accountability around the cost associated with that in terms of delays, irrespective of whether it's cyclists or it's pedestrians or it's buses or it's cars. So we don't have that. So my question is it possible to have something like that through this process? And if not now, then when?
I think that what I've done in support of, to a degree, of what you're saying, is that I have requested that there is a much more sense of urgency about digitising up our signals network. And that's been one of the things that I've asked recently, speaking to the board there. We can't measure those things until the digital situations are in place. But all the expensive stuff's in place, the lights are there, the powers are there, everything's there, but we're not brained up. And so that part of what the letter will be saying will to speed up the digitising and of our information of our signals network, which is not clever. I'll give you that.
The further question I'd put that goes to this is the inadequacy of benchmarking across some of our CCOs, particularly Auckland Transport. I know Councillor Lee raises this often around fare box recovery and other issues. I visited a city not long ago with a metro system that requires no central government or local government subsidy. It is that efficient. Can you imagine? So it would be useful to have some benchmarking with other cities so that we actually know how we're going. The reason those other cities are successful is because they're deploying things that we don't. So is it possible to have a response to that? Thank you.
Look, I think benchmarking is something worth investigating. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the statement of intent. That's staff we can bring back to you, looking at how the relative performance of AT is against other jurisdictions.
Deputy Mayor Simpson, please.
Thanks, Mayor. I've got two, one on Auckland Transport, one on water care. So my Auckland Transport one, the one thing that isn't actually in the shareholder comments is around the value of clear communication on a project, what it's for, how much it'll cost, how long it's going to last, rah-de-rah-de-rah. And I just wondered, and we saw this with, for example, the city centre, you know, the parking charges. So it's two parts to that. First part around the projects, how much they're going to cost, why they're there, how they make how they move people faster or how they keep people safer or whatever. My understanding is, and I've heard this from Auckland Transport, that they have got rid of the department that looked at that kind of key stakeholder engagement stuff. And I think that's really important. It's a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And so I would like to see a little bit more clear communication to stakeholders around that in the Auckland Transport space. When it comes to the city centre, I don't want to take away Councillor Lee. He is the councillor for the city centre. But I do think that when things happen in the city centre, that a memo should not go just to the local board and the local councillor. It is too important for the wider area. So I wondered if that could be included. And I'll go to water care in a minute, but if I could just stick with those first two first.
I'm happy to include that if that's the consensus from the around the table.
Thank you. And then my next question on water care is just, I don't really understand here. When we do a plan change, if they as an organisation don't have a problem with a plan change because the developer has its own water supply or wastewater plans, why do we, and they didn't require our network, why would we expect water care to oppose it?
I'll have a crack at this, and if Megan can hear me stepping out of line, no doubt she'll step up to rescue me. But with private plan changes, one of the few grounds I think the council has to object to them is actually the inability to supply water. Now, particularly with private plan changes that are out of sequence with our future development strategy, that's sort of committing the council group to expenditure that we haven't budgeted. So we would like the council group to be aligned in whether we're supporting or opposing private plan changes simply due to the financial impact on the wider group.
That's what I was asking.
But in some cases, the developers are quite happy to provide these themselves, and quite often they're a better standard than what we do.
In some instances, but not all.
Through Mayor, could I ask a question on that? Isn't it because we have instances where now water care is shipping wastewater away from some of these brought forward developments? Is it the case because we end up having to truck water in during droughts because the private supply of water, because it always falls back to us?
I see Megan approaching the table, so I think she'll be better placed to deal with this.
Through the chair, there's a little bit of a case-by-case, kind of analysis that needs to happen here. But I guess what we were trying to do, as Alistair was, or suggest to you, and if you don't want it, we can change it, is that as a group we need to consider what the impacts are. And sometimes at a particular point in time it might seem appropriate, but the reality is, particularly when it comes to water supply, the last person standing is always going to be water care, and these private systems don't always last. In fact, many of them fail, and Watercare is always asked and must take them on. And I think that poses a real risk. I'm not saying that in every situation, but it happens too many times. And that is an unbudgeted, expenditure that we will have either short or long term.
I've got to respond to that. We don't need to take them over. I mean, Watercare itself is famous for its failings as well. So I don't get the last man standing thing unless you want to be the last man standing. You don't have to take over roads. You don't have to take over any of these things. And I think we've got in the habit of not taking over things. And a lot of developers actually won't let you take over the roads.
I think in the instance of water, what's different here is Taumata Arawai and their drinking standards. If a drinking water system or a wastewater system isn't meeting the standards, effectively it does end up coming back to the councils, or in Auckland's case, Watercare, is their responsibility to fix it up. So we are the last people standing.
Councillor Newman, please.
Well, the officers agree that we have a wastewater network bylaw which requires connection to the public network within the urban area, and that regulates the requirement for this, and that also requires that the standard will be such as to ensure that we have a vested network that is fit for purpose on behalf of the ratepayers who ultimately do have to pick up the cost as per that bylaw.
I'd agree with that.
We'll try and get some wording along those lines in there if that's what an issue would need to be covered, and we'll try and get wordings to cover off the things that Councillor Walker raised as well in terms of benchmarking. We've had a fair crack at these. So, and there's been a lot of good work from the staff on this. So I'd like to thank them for that. I'll move that we get on with this, because it's got to be done by the end of the month, which, if I'm not sadly correct, is tomorrow. Councillor Henderson's come alive. How lovely.
Any comments?
Any comments? Oh, I'm going to put the damn thing. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, carried. Thank you very much.